وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله جبار العظيم. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Jazakumullah khair, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Inshallah ta'ala, I want to give you a short introduction before I hand it over to our guests today. And inshallah ta'ala, I hope it's going to be an inspirational session for you. But just to give you a little heads up in terms of an introduction to what does iCare do. iCare is the relief department, the UK relief department project of UK Islam Mission. It's an initiative dedicated to transforming lives and uplifting communities. Since the inception in 2016, iCare has been committed to tackling poverty, inequality and social injustice through practical, faith-driven solutions that seek to create lasting change. Our mission and our vision is guided by the principles of Islam, and our mission is to empower individuals, strengthen the communities, and advocate for justice for all. We believe in addressing not just the symptoms of poverty, but inequality, but also the root causes, ensuring that those in need are given the tools to build a better future. Our vision is a society where compassion, fairness, and opportunity are accessible to everybody. Through the range of projects and initiatives, iCare works to provide economic empowerment through financial literacy and skills training, develop youth leadership programs that equip young people with knowledge and confidence to drive change, we advocate for social justice and fair policies, challenging harmful narratives and ensuring underrepresented voices, making sure that underrepresented voices are heard. Support communities through charity, mentorship, and practical aid, fostering resilience and self-sufficiency. Our impact is real and it's growing, from mentoring young leaders to supporting families in financial distress. We strive to not just offer help, but hope and empowerment. Projects that we have delivered this year include litter picking, national litter picking, food hubs nationally, working with Macmillan Cancer, Gurbani meat distribution, online awareness programs, leadership programs, I Aspire events like this one. We're currently working on a hardship fund and finalizing our blood donation clinic. Inshallah ta'ala, that's coming soon. Looking ahead, iCare aims to expand its outreach, strengthen partnerships and collaborative work, and build an independent, self-sustaining model that allows us to scale our efforts and create long-term systematic change. We invite you to join us on this journey to support, collaborate, and work together in making a real difference. Because when we uplift others, we uplift society as a whole, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan. I'm going to hand it over to Sister Amara. Sister Amara is our iCare in charge in Scotland. A warm welcome to Sister Amara. Jazakumullah khairan, Sister. Over to you, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan.
Jazakallah khair and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to everybody who has joined us this evening. We're really grateful that we could have this session tonight, and it's a privilege to have Zara Mohammed tonight with us, who is, we all know, but I'm going to give a short introduction. So Zara Mohammed is a recognised leadership voice in British Muslim civil society. As the former Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain and the first woman, youngest and first Scot to hold the post, she has played a pivotal role in inspiring a new generation of leaders and strengthening connections between Muslim-led organisations and wider society. Through her consultancy work, she supports CSOs with leadership, development, governance and inclusion, helping build stronger, more collaborative and impactful networks across communities. A warm welcome, Zara. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to just give a quick hello? Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much to the iCare, I Aspire family for having me on this evening in chilly Glasgow, I think where we both are, Amara.
It is. It's a bit cold and wet up here now, isn't it?
Anyway, yeah, sorry.
No, I thought you were going to say something.
Yeah,
No,
no.
thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to hear about your journey, about how you've got to where you are today, and hear a little bit about you. So just to start things off, I want to hear from yourself about, what did you do, your background, your education. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, assalamu alaikum everyone, and again, thanks for having me on. So my story is, I think, quite a humble one in the sense that I didn't really have any aspiration to become a leader or even consider myself one. I didn't know what a secretary general was, or that, you could be that in life. I'm kind of born and raised Glasgow, kind of third generation, and really just, school, university, local. I think my kind of aspiration in life was both getting closer to my faith, so I took quite an academic approach to understanding Islam, but also I was always kind of looking for that sense of belonging. I went to a very white school, so there wasn't really any Muslims there. Then when I went to university, at that time I didn't have my headscarf on, so I was like, where are all the Muslims? How do I join that society? And academically, I did, law, politics, international human rights law. So I think a lot of my studies was, I was kind of really always searching for like, what is it that I want to give back? What do I want to do? For those of you who aren't from Scotland in this call, obviously the Muslim population is a little bit smaller. And I think at the time that we were both at university together, actually, Amara,
We
and
were indeed.
if you weren't visibly Muslim, I always kind of had this sense that, I'd be going to the prayer room, I'd be doing my prayers because I didn't outwardly look Muslim. I just really didn't know like what was the club that I belonged to. But it was through university that I actually found the Islamic Society. I kind of escalated in terms of leadership. They say if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And as a young, enthusiastic Muslim who just wanted to do lots of good work, I found lots of ways to be helpful and got promoted from a events coordinator to vice president. And you weren't really allowed to be president, so I just created the role of deputy president so I could just do that. And ended up running for student union president because the student union was like, hey, you're doing some great stuff. Why don't you run? And I think I just lost that by like, was it 200 votes or something? And it was probably the first time ever our union had, a young Muslim Pakistani female running for the election to represent, more than 20,000 students. But it probably was my first real insight into even recognizing that I could do that. And one of my funniest stories is when I was on the campaign trail, I had a cardboard tie that said vote for Zara. And I went to a room of 500 engineering students. So we had two of our like hijabi friends who happened to do engineering, only two out of the 500. And they were like, Zara, go come to our lecture, speak. So I'm standing in front of these, like 99.5% men. And I'm saying, okay, he's probably not going to do the women empowerment speech for this room. And they all just started laughing. And I was just thinking, I'm absolutely nuts. Like, what am I doing here? And I think that really probably in some ways encapsulated a lot of my journey to come. And maybe if I share another quick story with you all is I was kind of like the agony aunt in university. So people would come to the prayer room and I would more or less live there. And we had this Palestinian student come and she was crying her eyes out. And I was like, what's happened? Like, why are you upset? And she said, I was in the student union in the lift and there was, two guys and they were making fun of me and fun of what I was wearing. And she was crying her eyes and she goes, no one's going to do anything. And I was like, I don't think so. So I marched on over to the students union, up to the president's office. And I said, do you know what's happened? This is shocking. Not only did she get an apology, they got banned from the student union. And then she was crying again. I was like, why are you crying? She was like, it's never happened to me before. So I kind of realized at that moment, I guess in some ways it was a learning of things to come that like we all actually have a power to do something about a bad situation. And also, if you don't get involved, you won't really meet that team and family. Obviously, Amara and I actually were in uni together as well. It's very different people back then. But you know how like it was tough, like trying to figure out who you were, get your studies done, go back home to all the family stuff. And I think when I put my headscarf on in university as well, that's when I really started to be aware of how I came across to other people. So there was this girl in my law school and she started to change her behavior towards me when I put the headscarf on. I was like, oh, okay. And I knew exactly why she changed her behavior. And it was basically really uncomfortable. But later on, the moral of the story is when I got elected to Secretary General, she tweeted me congratulations. And I thought, you should be careful who you're mean to, because you never know where they're going to end up. So anyway, all of those stories were the making of my journey and kind of, I guess, helping me find myself, my calling, which was really about community. Maybe stop there.
No, it sounds like you've had such a mix of experience about finding out who you were and where do you belong and what is your identity and how do I fit into this society, which you said was predominantly white, and at the same time managing your studies, so like Deen and Dunya at the same time, but making sure you don't lose yourself amongst all of that. And then along the way, you've had empowering moments of helping others, being elected. Your journey of leadership, I'm assuming, has started from university, and that has obviously continued until now. And this is wanting to make me ask you, like, so what actually made you run for Secretary General for the Muslim Council of Britain? Like, obviously we've heard about your education side now, your career. How did that happen?
It's the essay question. Why did I do that? What was I thinking? Seriously. I started, so essentially when I was in the university, then university took me to FOSIS, the Federation of Student Islamic Societies. So obviously I became really vested in doing, not to my parents' pleasure, but I got very involved in extracurricular activities. One of them was going to conferences with FOSIS. And that's where I kind of found, like, oh my God, there's people like us all over the UK. We love to organize and get together and do qiyam and all the rest of it. So FOSIS was a member organization of the Muslim Council of Britain. And that's where they were like, so eventually I became FOSIS president. I was the first female to do that. Alhamdulillah. It was tough. I think everything is great in leadership apart from the top post. So those of us who've experienced like the position, it's the hardest one. So after the presidency, MCB kind of was like, do you want to consider joining like our board? Why don't you become in one of our leadership posts, like Assistant Secretary General at the time? So this is just before COVID and about the time the New Zealand Christchurch attacks happened, if you recall. I think it was 2018. So I joined the MCB team as an underling. I mean, I used to write minutes and coordinate things. I was kind of very small fish. But when the Christchurch attacks happened, that's when I kind of really appreciated the importance of a national coordinating body. It was such a scary moment. People were really worried. Could that happen here in the UK? And I think there was a real need of a kind of national leadership group. So I kind of really understood the purpose of MCB. But yet again, I did not see myself in any big position. It's quite content, just taking minutes, coming to national council meetings. Then COVID hit. And obviously, for those of you aware, MCB did a lot in terms of coordinating and getting groups together, translating guidance, the public health emergency. It was all all hands on deck, and everybody was doing so much. And I got more responsibility, so I ended up being like some of the Sky and BBC News interviews. I was helping with the staff. But ultimately, why I actually considered running, because elections were coming, because someone said to me after I was doing a lot of shura, well, isn't it about time? 50% of Muslims in this country are women and young people. And don't we need some diverse leadership? And I took lots of shura from many organizations, including this one. And one of the uncles, if I can say, said, we built a lot of these institutions, but our daughters and granddaughters don't feel the connection to them. They don't have leaders that they can really connect to. Not saying that I wanted to be that, but I think there was this whole sense of like, why not? And there was this kind of conversation, well, if Allah opens the door to good, wouldn't you take it? So that was one part of the reason, which was a feeling that there was a need in time for change. And the other part was like growing up, seeing people in the news, making me cringe. Unfortunately, we had really inarticulate people, they would get the craziest, wackiest person they could find to represent us on the news in a bad story. And all of us were just cringing. And it's always like, be careful what you wish for. I became that wacky uncle. And that the whole point, though, is that, I had this deep desire, like, well, why are we so afraid to talk about our faith? Why can't we take on those? And seeing, some of the really bad interviews, even of people who were quite good at talking, because that media hostility and aggression. So anyway, alhamdulillah, I put my, name in the running. There was a very famous imam that ran against me, but it was Allah's will that I was elected in January 2021, and it was COVID. And then began one of the four many craziest years of my life, where I was elected at 29, this little Glaswegian. I said to everyone, like, you're absolutely crazy, who's going to elect me? But then 4 years later, I feel like I'm bordering 60 now. Inside, I have aged. And yeah, it's been quite the learning.
No, it sounds like it's you've had to come out your comfort zone. You've had to challenge the fact that you're a female. You're empowering others, being in this leadership role. Being a role model and an example. You've had to deal with the media. Like, what did you have to do to learn how to speak to the media? Like, you mentioned sometimes there are wacky people out there who are asked questions, but did you have to learn, or did you train yourself on how to approach the media, what to say, what not to say? How do you be careful? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to borrow the phrase baptism of fire. So here I am in lockdown conditions, creating a studio in my living room with a lamp, my laptop. And the very first interview I did was, so I honestly, I'm going to be really honest, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I thought maybe BBC will have a little headline. Turns out it was quite a big deal. And everybody and their uncle wanted to get a slice of it, So international, local, news, print, broadcasts, you name it, our phones and inboxes was going crazy. Muslims, predominantly men and imams and mosques, elected this 29-year-old from Glasgow to be like one of the most senior faith representatives in the country. Just mad. So first interview I did was live on BBC at 6 p.m. on my laptop, and I couldn't see. So basically it's just a blank screen because it was Zoom, start of Zoom. And I'm just talking for 4.5 minutes to the screen. I remember someone messaging me saying, "Well done, this is why we elected you." So, but that whole first week was really, really difficult. There was no time for training. There was no time for messaging documents, preparation. It just was intense. And, a majority, I would say, media was actually really positive and supportive. But sadly, as expected, there were parts of the media who really just couldn't cope. I was called a puppet and a token, a pleasant face away from a cross-eyed bearded man, and I quote. And my most famous interview, of course, was Women's Hour with Emma Barnett on Radio 4. Some people may remember it. And I was told by the producer it was going to be a really beautiful interview. Like, she wanted to get to know me. It was going to be really, really intimate. So I'm like, oh, well, it's called Women's Hour, so surely it's going to be nice. And here I am, and the first caller, it's like really nice. She's talking about, harassment and stuff, and she's been really sympathetic. I thought, oh, she seems really nice. As soon as I come on, the tone changes. Your organization claims to be inclusive of women, but can you tell me how many female imams are there in the UK? And I was like, okay, I think we're going in a different direction with this one. And the whole interview, I had so many BBC complaints that week, one of the most. There was an open letter from Diane Abbott. It was very obvious. It was like a gotcha style. It wasn't about the win. It was about, again, making it like tokenistic and I'm being controlled. And the Telegraph did a piece. And so there were some parts of the media who just really couldn't accept it, although it was a massive win in some ways for communities. And it kind of really woke me up to the fact that this wasn't going to be an easy ride, that whilst we as communities are really diverse, we've moved on. Like, they didn't expect my Scottish accent. They just didn't expect any of me. That whilst we'd moved on, they hadn't. And political and media narratives were going to continue. They just couldn't cope with Muslim women being framed in any other way than oppressed. And in the 4 years, we asked me, how did I deal with media? Well, to be honest with you, it was really, alhamdulillah, I've got to thank Allah, because I personally don't know how I survived. But we had some really tough moments. We had some terror attacks. There was another crisis in Gaza before the one 2 years ago, in the Ramadan, if you all remember. And one of the big ones that I did was Ian Dale live on LBC. It was 7 p.m. So, LBC's got millions of listeners. It was drive time. I did this interview. There was no crisis. It was just, there was no other story, right? They were desperate to get me on, and my team was like, are you sure? What do we think? Could it be, could it get out of control? But I just did three things. I prayed. I called my mum. I asked her, "What do you think?" "You'll be fine, just do what you always do." And then I made the dua before entering the studio. I said, "Oh, turner of the hearts, turn his heart towards me." And then I just went for it. And you'll see there was a lot of fiery questions. But for me, the point is, if we are Muslim, we should be confident in our faiths. We shouldn't be ducking, right? And I can say that, but I understand not everybody wants to do media. And then, after we had, so for me, it was like, I just think we need to inspire confidence in who we are and talk about our faith and belief. And we can do that without being aggressive and defensive. And so in my 4 years, I've done Newsnight, Sky, BBC, the whole lot. Gaza was really asked, do you condemn? I did all of that stuff as well. Even just this morning, I recorded a piece on women in faith and leadership. So I think the moral of the story is that I kind of learned that media is also a really useful tool, because when I was on Sky, everybody watched it. When I was on Times Radio, everybody's listening. So actually, when we're not challenging the narrative on the platforms that matter, then other people just take the story. And so we had the summer riots. The government wasn't even calling it Islamophobia, but I was on 50 different stations and, interviews that week, my birthday week as well, to do that, because if we didn't say there was another narrative, the other one would dominate. So I think, alhamdulillah, I say it's through a blessing of Allah that I got better as I went. But I often really didn't have a choice. I could be at my mum's house at 10 o'clock and someone says you need to go live, and I'm working out how I'm going to do it. Or there's a breaking news story. Sometimes I'd just be afraid that when I'd wake up, like the news would go crazy. So it's definitely one of the hardest parts of the role, but you just can't be afraid. I mean, I've been featured on the front page of the Daily Mail as a part of an extremist organization, which was really nice. The government tried to ban us at one point. I thought, I've got a background in international human rights law. I'm not really sure how these two things are connecting. So yeah, it was definitely one of the tougher parts of the role, but I think Allah puts you where you're meant to be. And I think it's difficult, but we have to rise to the occasion. And if we're not willing, someone said to me, "Are you sure you want to do that? Like, how are you going to get a job if you take this role on?" But I always think, well, maybe that job's not for me. Definitely will not be for me. But also, if some of us aren't prepared to do this work and carry this burden or this responsibility, then, who is? So alhamdulillah, I just did my best. But yeah, it was pretty tough. But yeah, I guess I don't know if I'd actively want to pursue media now, but yeah, I don't mind taking them on if need be.
I think maybe you could have your own show. I think you've got so much to talk about and tell us. You could create a podcast. But no, it definitely does sound challenging. You've had to have thick skin, but I absolutely agree that Allah only puts so much burden on a person that they can handle. So you were obviously perfect for the role. You are perfect for the role. Yes, you are perfect for the role. You are in this leadership position. You've taken on this responsibility. At times it can be such a thankless job. It can be a thankless job, but your willingness to continue, you're showing resilience, and your confidence is growing as you're going through your journey. Like, you can visibly see that and hear that in your story. But like, another thing that's coming to mind is you were, the youngest female. I'm Scottish and Pakistani, to be in this role. Like, did that come with any challenges or barriers, in the sense of, did people listen to you? Did they take you seriously? Or was it okay over time? Like, how was that?
Oh, well, I always say that obviously gender and age. Those were the two biggest challenges. And I think whilst maybe gender was moderately better, age was very difficult when you're the youngest person in the organization and the boss. There will be challenges. And I think a lot of people say they want leadership, they want young people to lead. Do they really? I'm not sure they're ready. And I think, I learned lots of important lessons. When you're young, you can have a lot of we're just really fast, we've got lots of ideas and we want to move really quickly. Not everybody is ready to move at that pace. I think naturally, as a woman in leadership, I would say no, and then we'd be asked 3 or 4 more times. Well, really? Are you sure? And I think it takes a lot of, you kind of have to focus on your own mindset, because if you feel like people have bias towards you, it can be really crippling. And I just didn't allow it. So sometimes I'd say, I'm not talking to you as a woman in leadership, I'm talking to you as a national leader, asking for your help. I did those tough interviews, tough meetings, and represented communities that won and earned me a lot of respect, because I was doing the hard work. And I would say to people, well, you take that Sky News interview and let me know how you get on, right? And I think also, it's, for me, part of the challenge was, if I made a mistake and did a bad job, every other woman would be then, we'll see, we told you we can't have a woman in this post because look what they've done. So there was absolutely a pressure being a young person. I had an interview from some mainstream paper, said, well, people in your position are really usually quite old. Do you think you have enough wisdom to do the position? I said, well, I've got energy and I'm willing to take, get the experience, and wisdom comes from experience. I'm willing to do my best. And so I think there was a lot of kind of bias and perceptions and there were so many of that, but then I wasn't going to sit and listen to it or to do, you know what I mean? I wasn't going to allow it to stop me from thinking that I couldn't do the job, as much as it was a real challenge. And I think there's definitely a conversation in our community that, mashallah, so many more women are coming forward and young people are doing things. But, when I came into MCB, the leadership position was not designed around a woman. It was made for a man. And therefore, there was a lot of changes that needed to be made internally to recognize, well, things are different. There's safety concerns. I've got to travel around the country. There's different responsibilities that we have. So if it's, it's very restrictive in that, and the expectations of how a man operates and how a woman operates, too tough, too soft, too controlling, too dominating, too this, too that. And so I just kind of learned, like, I just have to be myself and just carry on. But certainly that was a challenge. And I think being a young person as well, at the start, it was like, I don't think people are taking me seriously. There was someone who came to see me at the MCB office and said, I'm here to see the Secretary General. I said, yeah. And they said, well, is she here? I'm like, yeah. And they looked me up and said, you're the Secretary General? I was like, yeah, hello. So I think they're just like, who is this tiny little person? Am I the secretary? And I went to another conference with one of the brothers who was with me. And they thought I was his assistant. He was the Secretary General. He's like, no, that's my boss. So, and then there was an ambassador I met, and he goes, in our countries, our leaders are big. They're big, like this big, and you're too small. So there's a lot of just perceptions around who we formulate. But for me, I was like, nah, forget that. I'm going to do what I need to do. And I got invited to a conference. They wanted me to stick me on the women in theology. I said, I haven't got Scooby about women in theology. Stick me on the other panel. What am I going to talk about? So part of it is educating each other. And, I was at a mosque and I got to sit in the chairman's seat in the masjid. I was like, am I allowed to sit here? And it was in Leicester, and they had 40, imams and all sorts sitting on the floor, and I'm sitting on a chair for 2.5 hours answering questions. I went to some of the Darul Ulooms, I met the young boys, so I found myself in different spaces that maybe women weren't always in, but I made it a point to be there confidently and to also hopefully be a bit of a bridge to say, maybe we need to change things here. So yeah, it certainly was an interesting time.
Well, definitely, you're breaking stereotypes, you're getting out there, but you're doing it in a manner like that's accepted. You're not doing it so boldly, and you're not going out your way to say, hold on a second, give me some space. You're doing it in a manner that's being accepted, and people are willingly saying, yeah, we're wanting to accept this change. Change is necessary. And I think, especially in this time of how are we supposed to, present our beautiful faith in such times that we're living in at the moment. The media is very quick to change the narrative. People are not educated enough. They don't know. Sorry, the messages are coming in and it's distracting me. But I'm going to switch that off. So educating people, having conversations. This is the way people are going to learn from one another. We're living in the UK. We live among so many different ethnicities and identities, and it's really important that we get out there, we talk to folk, and we put, our best foot forward. And coming to my next question, Zara, how can we stay resilient in our faith? How can we move forward in times that we're living in at the moment?
Yeah, I think these are really challenging times. I mean, we were in the era of Trump and Musk. Tommy Robinson had like 100,000 people in his march. The rise of Nigel Farage and reform. We've just had the stats on Islamophobia. There's been a massive spike and increase. We had the mosque in Peacehaven, like a massive arson attack, and we're kind of seeing that differential treatment when it comes to Islamophobia and Muslim issues. We still don't have a definition. I think overall, it's definitely a time where people could fairly feel quite gloomy and quite worried. A little bit of echo. Somebody might need to mute. Oh, there we go. I totally get that people can feel, I mean, and that's not taking into consideration Gaza and the international humanitarian crisis and Palestine more widely and Sudan. And so it goes on, right? And I think, Muslims, we are, people of faith, do not lose hope in Allah, hold on to the rope of Allah. And I think that's kind of part of our test. As soon as we assume we have control, we have lost. And I think a lot of what got me through as Secretary General, people said, didn't you want to give up? Yeah. Didn't you have bad days? Of course. And like the summer riots last year were really scary because I just thought, oh my gosh, like we're seeing live on our streets people who hate us and want to smash up our mosques and harm us. But I kind of thought, people are counting on you to turn up. People are counting on you to to do your bit and to do good. And I think so long as we believe and strongly hold on to our faith and know Allah's there, like we just really can't worry too much. I think our job is to do our best with what we can and what we have. So I think being resilient is actually checking on our basics. Often when we're in really Islamic environments, we don't do very Islamic things. Prayer can be rushed because we've got the event coming up, or we've not got time to sit and read some Quran, or we're not giving in charity, or we're not really mindful of our manners, So I think there's some really basic things in it. And a good scholar said to me, it's also about the deeds that you do that nobody knows about. And I think often when you're doing very visible, good work, it can get to your, the nafs, the ego, and oh yeah, I'm great because, I've got loads of really good photos of me doing great things. But actually, I think kind of checking your intention. I think for a lot of young people, it is a tough atmosphere, but we need to be there to create an atmosphere that says, look, no, you need to strive. People in our history have been through massive tests and trials, but you've got to keep going. And I think so long as there's good people to do good work, you'll always find a little bit of kindness and goodness everywhere. So yeah, I think perseverance is needed even more now than it has before.
No, absolutely. And you got stuck into roles at university and then in your career, and you have been persevering along the way. But what do you think we could tell our young people if they want to engage with the community, especially the Muslim community? What kind of things should they be getting involved in? Like we have eye care, for example, where we've took off in Scotland as well. We're doing projects here and there. What would you advise, Zara, to young people to engage with the community?
Speak to yourself and Sajad there, national coordinators and leads on how to get involved. Look, I think the community space is hard work, so we won't sugarcoat it. And volunteering now, there seems to be a lack of enthusiasm to do lots of volunteer work. People have busy lives, COVID ruined a lot of that socialization. It is like, I've got work, I've got so much going on. But there really is nothing better and lighter on the heart than getting involved. And I would say start small, do a little bit. Obviously, me and Amara, we do a regular litter pick in the community. And we just had so many people saying, oh my God, thank you so much for doing this. I know it's a lot of hard work. It's quite addictive, actually, if you do like cleaning. I quite enjoyed it. It's very therapeutic. But I think for me, I wouldn't be where I was without doing that. I didn't even know I had leadership skills. I built my confidence. I met amazing people from all over the world, from so many cities. It took me to places and spaces I just didn't know I could even be myself in. I think that's what volunteering really does. And when you're giving back, for the sake of Allah, when you're doing good, you are in some ways healing yourself. That's part of your connection to God. It's kind of like we give sadaqah, we give zakat. Doing good is part of our DNA. And I think volunteering, especially when you're young, is such a great character builder and such a good boost. And I'm, for me, like I just met so many amazing people that I was inspired by. And then along that journey, obviously, I became the diehard volunteer by becoming the Secretary General and took it all the way to the nth degree. You don't need to do that, ladies and gentlemen. But I think for a lot of youngsters, it's a great place to build confidence, to build skills. And perhaps now the challenge for those of us who are trying to encourage young people to get involved is like a lot of them are asking, what's in it for me? Why? And I think it's kind of a harder sell. So volunteering now needs to be done right. It's got to not burn people out and exploit them. It's got to be facilitating and nurturing young people and creating a really welcome space that people can be themselves. Because our youngsters are really diverse now. They don't fit into nice molds and models. And I think we need to create an environment where they feel they're going to be accepted and not judged. And that would just be, I think it was different, right? We were a lot more well-behaved in our time. I don't know, some of us, maybe not. Maybe that's too much of a generalization, but you get what I'm saying, Amara, right? Like it's young people are going through lots of challenges, mental health.
They are.
Pressure online.
COVID has had such a big impact on everybody of all ages, and people are still wanting to stay quite isolated and they're hesitant to come forward. Like I know so many young people, we engage with young people all the time and we're like, come forward, come to volunteering, even if it's not volunteering, or come along to like a session or something. And it's really like, it's like pulling teeth sometimes, but like you said, you have to create that welcoming environment, and we are trying to do that. iCare is trying to do that. UKIM is trying to do that. And I would say definitely look locally in your areas at what is out there, what is going on. If something interests you, get involved. If it's something different you want, ask the questions, ask them, tell them, this is what we would like to do. Can you please put it on for us? And I'm sure no one's going to say no. But it's also us learning what do the young people need, but the young people also learning how did they interact with. Are we still youngsters or are we the older generation now?
In the middle, I hope.
Are we in between?
We're the bridge. We are the bridges.
We're bridging. Okay, we're bridging the gap between our respected folk and some youngsters. Absolutely. No, definitely. We're happy to do that. We're in these spaces because we want to see change. We want people to come together in communities, and it'd be great to see more engagement from all ages. And just lastly, I want to ask you, so how important is faith in what you do?
Ultimately, I became the secretary of the Muslim Council of Britain, so I think faith has been a driving force. When I put my headscarf on, one of my friends who's also Muslim said, well, I couldn't do that because I wouldn't get a job. And I kind of self-righteously said, well, I wouldn't want that job. But statistically speaking, she was right. Visibly Muslim women are the most marginalized when it comes to employment. And I think making faithful decisions and being on the journey of faith is one that is full of tests and trials. And that's the nature of it, right? Your Islam and your faith is always going to be tested. And I think for me, faith has been absolutely critical because of what I did, seeking to represent Muslims. You can't really be unauthentic in that experience. But ultimately, life is hard. And I think, the most important things I did was like when I retreated away. So obviously I didn't have a cave to go into, but I'd take, after Fajr walks in the park when Fajr was like 7 a.m. and go speak to the ducks for a bit, just take a bit of time out and reassess, and I'd have times where, I had a really good friend who was like, I was really stuck on what to do. And he's like, he was a chaplain, you're going to do the right thing, aren't you, Zara? And so you're always questioning your kind of morality and ethics. Every day I was worried when I was in the post, did I do enough? Have I done enough? Will it be enough? You're kind of always judging because when you're in a position of leadership, you are rewarded for the good that you do and others follow you on. But for the things that you do and others follow that are bad, you're also going to be punished for that. So I think there was this sense of pressure. But then this kind of realism that like we're all human after all, we can only do our best. So I think, faith was absolutely integral to my survival, to the healing, but also to the joy. Ramadan, for example, just incredible. They've become maybe, particularly like lockdown Ramadan, I must admit, was a really lovely experience. It's really calm, really at home, really just, we're not running around and stuff. But obviously we had a fun Ramadan this term. I was helping with Tarawih coordination, which was really great. But I think it's that sense that like we're a communal faith, coming together, helping each other, being connected. Like we're having this session today as well. We're all actively involved. We're thinking about community. And that's kind of what makes that joy. And I think faith is connected to joy and hope, and we have to kind of hold on to that. So yeah, it's been integral. But alhamdulillah, faith has guided me to places that I didn't know, and led to that sense that, yeah, well, why not? Maybe Allah's got a bigger plan for me, and I should be hopeful and embrace that.
Alhamdulillah. No, it's just having the tawakkul in Allah, isn't it? That the best will happen, staying positive, and as tiring as it can be, sometimes having a positive mindset. As you said, it's good to just take a break, time out, have a bit of reflection time, see what you need to work on, and then when you're ready, come back to business, basically. But no, Jazakallah so much for taking the time out to speak to us this evening. I'm aware there's some questions that have been popping up in the chat. Brother Naseem, do you want to have a look, take over?
Jazakallah khair, Sister Mara, and thank you so much, Sister Zara, mashallah. Wonderful. Honestly, the feedback that we're getting, I'm getting personal text messages saying this is brilliant. This is exactly what we need, and more often, to be honest. I think we need it to be done more frequently, so that we actually all learning, all participating, and all improving, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah khair. So the first question I've had is levels of activism amongst young people have changed over the years, particularly towards Islamic work. So when it comes to Islamic work, we become a little bit lazy and lethargic. What approaches can we take to engage young people? I think you did touch on it, but just expand on that a little bit if you can.
Yeah, I think I get this question a lot, which is how do we engage young people? And I think part of our challenge is we haven't moved with the times. Young people now have friends online that they physically have never met. In COVID, they didn't need to socialize. And also, like my younger siblings say to me, like, what's in it for me if I'm not getting paid? Why am I going to do it? Why would I want to do that hike? I'm going to get tired and cold. Why am I going to go to the mosque? It's people are going to tell me off or look at me, or, I don't wear a headscarf, so I don't want to get judged. I think we've got to really review what is the USP, what's the unique selling point here? What are we offering our young people? And look at the best in practice in the volunteer sector. They give incentives, they reward, they train, they upskill. They're offering young people a more wholesome and complete program. Like, a lot of young people, they don't necessarily want to go away from home and do retreats. That might be a lot, right? And I think sitting down and listening to a lecture for an hour is a hard ask in today's day, even for us adults, right? I think we all struggle. We've got to check our phones every 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. So I think we've got to really review, and our places of worship, we've got to be honest, they still need to update. I mean, one of the best practices that I saw, I went to a mosque in London, and they bought another building next to the mosque and made it a workspace. It was called a library, but it was really amazing, beautiful sitting room with Wi-Fi and a games room next to it, right? And I was like, I cut the ribbon to open the place. You can see on my Instagram. It was very, very nice. But I just thought, oh my gosh, you get it. A free Wi-Fi. Every young person is going to come for free Wi-Fi. Yeah, connect me, workspace, just a few books. Then you got the pool table and the ice hockey stuff. And, I think it's understanding what our young people need from us today. Many people are really isolated, especially young men. Yeah, we know young men are really isolated. Having places to just have a coffee and a tea, right? Women and well-being and health. We know Muslim women are unfortunately, they don't get out enough, especially in South Asian community. So taking people out of the institution, non-traditional, alternative, being creative, but looking at how do we give our volunteers the best back. So for example, we did visit my mosque open day, and I tried to recruit lots of people, lots of diversity. And we got lots of young people. And it's an amazing young boy. He was 18. He was carrying things, rolling things, moving things around. He goes, I play basketball. I was so impressed. And he came on time. And he was like, he went out and he did leafleting. And we got like 40 people coming in for that leafleting. His enthusiasm was great. But I know he's probably exceptional to the rule. there was a lot of young people who just would not be interested in an open day at the mosque. So I think it's about how we communicate to young people what the offering is, understanding their terms and conditions, and really thinking about in today's age when you can sit in your room comfortably and have a whole online world and be entertained, getting out your room and getting in a space and learning what's the benefit of that again. And, our parents mirror our kids mirror their parents, their siblings, they look to us. So if we're not projecting healthy, positive attitudes to Islamic work, they're not going to be inspired. And I know like my siblings used to hate it because I'd be always away. And then I kind of started inviting them and taking them along. They don't mind the free 3-course dinner meals. That seems to work. But it's that idea, like if you don't even enjoy what you do and it's making you miserable, why would they want to do it, So I think really taking it on its side and thinking, what would young people, and asking them, getting co-creation, right? Ask them what they want to do too.
Very good. Very good. Jazakallah khair. Okay, so next question is, what do you think about women-only mosques or women-led mosques? In Bradford, we have the Muslim Women's Council who are advocating women-led mosques. Personally, spoke against it some 10 years ago. However, the pace of change has been slow. So my view now is somewhat in favor of the notion. What are your thoughts?
So obviously I am familiar with Muslim Women's Council. I've been them, I've met them, I was just at their conference too. So now I really don't want to get into trouble for this question. Look, I think everything has its context, right? So what we're really talking about is the inclusion of women in places of worship at a first level, right? So the first level is, unfortunately, whilst generally speaking, it's far more positive than it's ever been. And there's a lot more places who are now not just incorporating spaces for women, but mums and toddlers. I went to the Cambridge Eco Mosque. They got like a sound-free glass wall, East London. So there's lots of spaces that are now thinking, okay, we have to include women and we've got to include them properly. But there are lots of institutions still not letting women in. And I've understood the story of why the Muslim Women's Council want a dedicated space, because as you said, progress has been very slow in that particular context. And I think when we sensationalize things and we make it like, oh, it's a feminist movement, women want to break free and that, we're kind of in some ways not being fair, right? Because we know the issues. Sometimes it's about space and access inclusion. Other times it's about the leadership where we're not even feeling included, even if they can use a space. A lot of women, there was a massive survey done by the Centre for Islamic Studies in Cardiff by Dr. Riaz Tamol and Haroon Sadat. They surveyed over 50, and they talked about, women being afraid to talk to the imam, not even knowing who the imam is, Women face lots of challenges when it comes to accessing space and prayer. But like I said, things have moved on so much, alhamdulillah. So in this particular case, like each their own. I'm not going to get involved in saying anything. I think I don't see the problem in a women-only space, if I'm honest, because I think women need spaces just like men have plenty. But I think the bigger issue is around women being included in the spaces they should be included in an equitable fashion, not just in a tiny little cubby hole in the back. But like I would say, I think the trend is more positive, and I think it's moving along. And I know for at least a lot of the UK mosques I visited, it's been very positive. Not everybody has changed as much as they need to. And the final point I'll make, it connects to our youngsters. Like, if you're not inclusive, they're not going to come. And you're just going to miss a generation. And if the girls are not included, then don't come complaining when they go elsewhere, because they will, right? And that's the moral of the story here, which is you can't have this, like, on one hand, oh, it's ridiculous women are doing this, and on the other hand, not include them. And I think that's the dichotomy that we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Okay, is there too much of an expectation from our legacy institutes, given that they don't have the expertise or resources to engage with young people?
Just want me to get me into trouble today.
Yeah.
Right. How are we going to diplomatically handle that one?
Yeah.
So I think what we're talking about here is who is best equipped. I mean, look, I think with respect to everybody, right? And we always say that, like, our institutions wouldn't be here without that founding generation. And I think there has to be an acknowledgement that where they are and were to where the new Gen Z or whatever one we're on now is very far away. You know, these two groups probably wouldn't even speak the same language.
Yeah.
But everybody is on TikTok. That's universal. So yeah, founding generations are also on TikTok, as are the youngsters. So there's a bit of universality. I think there's a reality. You know, one of the sisters I was talking to was telling me about one of the UKIM youth groups. She says we've got loads of uni students dealing with those kids, and they just connect much better. I think, as always, young people will connect better to people who get what they're going through, and you know, there's no about that. And I think to do this effectively, the older generation need to give space. They need to facilitate, and they need to trust and let people have space, let young people have space and access, and be creative and do things non-traditional in those spaces. I think that's where we're getting the pushback, where it's like, you can have space, but you've got to do like the dars, or you've got to do the Quran circle, or you've got to do, you know, things that fit the traditional model, which is maybe what they did. Whereas our young people, like I said, the Wi-Fi generation, are not going to be wanting to do that. They may want a creative class, they want to maybe, as I said, MMA fighting, they maybe want some pool table, watch the cricket, pizza night, whatever it is, right? And there's loads of different really ideas just to get them in this space. So I think maybe there's got to be a little bit of relaxation on the reins, but probably we've got to all work together in harmony to work out how it is.
Absolutely. Okay, so another question here for you from a brother Tariq. What do you see as the challenges in getting the UK government to accept the definition of Islamophobia, or do you think this is a lost cause and we should just move on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously right now, so the state of play is that the government they created a working group, a task force led by Dominic Grieve. What's being heard is they have formulated a definition and it is going to be coming out. The Telegraph leaked a story saying it wasn't going to be called Islamophobia now, but something else, anti-Muslim hatred or anti-Muslim hostility or something to that effect. So there is going to be apparently a definition coming out now. That's what we are hearing. Let's see what materializes. I think there's a bigger conversation on the state of Islamophobia and the fact that, you know, we had the horrible arson attack on a mosque. Yeah, I didn't see the Home Secretary go visit or the Prime Minister. I haven't seen an increase in mosque security funding. A lot of our mosques don't have the capacity and resources to have security guards and, you know, full-time security. And I think there is this kind of hierarchy of racism, and we're just, as a community, not as effective as we need to be in lobbying that. But then I would say it's a systemic issue that even if we were effective, I don't know if we necessarily still get the kind of protections that we need at this point in time. And I think there's a lot of really bad faith actors who we just saw in a certain think tank talking about, you know, blasphemy laws will be at risk if we have this definition. And I just think we need a stronger government who's really willing to push this properly. So let's see what happens with this interview and see what happens. And also, Naseem, I think I read the question wrong on the legacy point. I think what they were saying is that our institutions are not equipped to actually deal with young people because they don't have the expertise and resources. But what I would say is that a lot of organizations have just been created because of that. And there's a lot more, you know, it's scouts or youth groups or youth organizations or youth-led. You've got like something fantastic, the Muslim Tech Fest, which is really quite creative. So I think you're right to an extent, but I think institutions still have to wake up and do something about it, because it's just not good enough to say, well, because they don't have the expertise, they shouldn't. What we need to do, as my colleague here, Amara, has got lots of skills on engaging young people, is they need to get a Duke of Edinburgh in there, and they need to do more work and recruit the talent, right?
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. Barakallahu feekum. I think I've covered all the questions, inshallah ta'ala. So I can pass the floor back to Sister Amara, if that's okay.
No, Jazakallah. It's been really exciting and insightful to hear your journey, and honestly, heartfelt thank you for joining us this evening and openly sharing, you know, how it's been along the way, your honesty, and seeing your strength and your confidence just growing and growing with every single experience you've had, and you've not let anything put you off, and you're still ready to go. And you know, you've been working with, you know, supporting and volunteering with iCare up in Scotland as well, and we're so happy to have you on board up here as well. And I'm sure everyone who was listening today has felt motivated and reflecting on their own self, what can they do more, and hopefully inshallah once we all work together we can definitely make a better and impactful and lasting change for our young people. And no, Jazakallah khair for joining us this evening. And Zara, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, just final words. Obviously, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to share. I do always kind of cringe at myself. As my young sister's like, oh my God, why do they invite you to these inspiring, motivational things? But I do think, as you said, there's always a wisdom in sharing it. And as I kind of still tour around the country, sometimes I get the opportunity to meet people. I was in Milton Keynes for like an Islamophobia workshop, and Bedford for like a women's empowerment session. And I think there's a lot of people who are already doing amazing work. And I always say, like, you're already doing it, you don't need me. But it's great if there are people we can lean into, right? And just offer a bit of encouragement and support. And I think my journey was quite a wild one and it allowed me to do crazy things. But as you said, I had so many amazing supportive organizations like QKIM that keep me going. But ultimately, I always say to people, like, Allah's put you where you're meant to be. So do the best that you can with that position while you have it, because sometimes it's going to be taken away from you. And I think there's so many people in this little community of ours that need us. There's a lot of isolation and loneliness. And I think our job is to try and uplift and do the good we can. And then finally, I want to say is, like, often it's not necessarily what you do, but who you become in the process. That was the biggest lesson that I learned, that actually, Allah's talks about our efforts and intention, not necessarily the product of it. And so actually a lot of the times we're trying to just like project manage and deliver and get it done. But if we're not doing that in a way that makes people feel good around us and empowered, then are we really winning? So yeah, it's been a heck of a journey, mashallah, but my blessing to serve Muslims across the country, may Allah accept it, Ameen, to keep us united. And I think, yeah, we're waiting for the next one. Who's going to be the next SG? Yeah, we've got any takers? I think elections will be coming next year. So I don't want to be the only woman, right? We're waiting. So there better be some more coming along. But yeah, thanks both. And thanks everybody on the team for really fantastic conversation. Thanks for your questions, everybody.
I'm sure you might have motivated someone to go for the role next time. And, seeing yourself in these positions and listening to your story just shows, nothing is a barrier. Like, be it at your hijab, like maybe some young people are like, no, I can't do it. I'm a Muslim, or I'm visibly Muslim. But I always say, our hijab is not a hindrance, but it's a source of power to just keep going and use it as your superpower, and don't let it put you off. And listen, come and meet leaders like Zara, and there's so many other role models, female role models out there who are doing fantastic work. And it's really important that we give them these spaces so their stories can be heard, so they can motivate other youngsters to maybe, follow their footsteps, or just do give them the confidence to take that leap of faith in whatever they're wanting to do, to show them that nothing is impossible, inshallah. But no, jazakallah khair for coming, and jazakallah khair to everybody joining us this evening. We really appreciate you coming, taking out your time, and we hope to see you on the next one, inshallah. So from all of us tonight, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Jazakallah khair, and inshallah ta'ala, keep in touch, and let's make sure that the next one is going out there. Join our mailing list. Anything that you've liked today, please do let us know your comments. Anything that you've not liked, that's from us, so please forgive us for that and let us know so that we can improve for next time, inshallah ta'ala. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله جبار نظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.